Hello everyone, this is part 4 of What If Naruto Was Neglected and Was Trained by Shisui, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. 3 weeks later. The mission is simple: we get in there, retrieve the folder and get away as fast as possible. Leave no evidence behind. A soft, powerful feminine voice rang through the forest clearing, bouncing off the decaying oak trees, letting it linger in the summer air. The tone of voice was dark, the holder being horribly serious as her feminine hand rested on one of the trees. Her fingernails tried to pierce the dying bark as her blue eyes wandered around the forest. The voice belonged to the one and only Narumi Namikaze. Her father, the Hokage, put her in charge of a simple retrieval mission just outside the border of Konoha. While this isn't her first retrieval mission, it didn't stop her from being overly serious. She quickly scanned over the area, her eyes coming to rest on an old-looking cabin that was just outside of Tsuna town. Letting the soft breeze flow over her body, allowing the air to slightly calm her. 3 guards on each side of the building, she whispered to herself as her eyes shifted to a cluster of trees just past the cabin. Hiding in the trees are another set of 3, their chakra signatures are much larger, high chunin if I had to estimate. Her bangs fell forward slightly, obscuring her vision and shadowing her eyes. Mission start. Konoha. I'll fucking kill you. Shizuka yelled, and as what seemed like the 100th kunai left her palms as it soared through the air, all aimed over to the black-haired teammate of Team 11. Sai wasn't a prideful man, hell he didn't have that many emotions since he was taken into the Anbu at such a young age. And he knows that for as long as he lives, he will never admit that he was scared at this very moment. Really fucking scared. Shizuka tossed another kunai, this one barely nicking Sai across the cheek. Naruto watched from the sidelines in pity. While he did find the affectionate nickname Tits for Shizuka to be quite funny, he knew it was gonna bite the boy in the ass someday. He didn't expect it to be barely 3 weeks after becoming an official team. So here he was now witnessing a murder attempt while he periodically had to sidestep from a kunai that Shizuka missed Sai with. Their team training with Anko had ended a while ago. She quickly left the training ground and all 3 genin decided to stay to get a little extra training in. The only rule she gave was to make sure they were well rested for tomorrow. Apparently they were getting a new mission. And just 2 hours went by before all hell broke loose between Team 11. Shizuka, knock it off. At least give him some breathing room. The raven-headed genin snapped her head over to Naruto and gave one of her meanest glares. Her grip tightening around her kunai as her emerald eyes locked within Naruto's own sapphire. Shizuka scoffed as she put her kunai away, letting Sai walk off free. Her eyes never leaving Naruto's. After seeing Sai walk off, he let a small smile grace his lips. Sai was very, very sweaty, but other than a few cuts here and there he looked perfectly fine. He turned to Sai. You okay? Sai gave a hesitant nod of gratitude to the blonde as he smiled. Yes, it was a good workout. Please, all you did was run around for an hour. Cardio is important. Naruto sighed as he watched the 2 start to bicker once again. Well, more like Sai just led Shizuka on until she got fed up and brought her weapons out. His eyes going back and forth between the 2. Even though he was starting to get fed up with the constant bickering, it did bring a smile to his face. Feeling like he was a part of a group, as he would be the one to step in. And sometimes be on the receiving end with Shizuka. Naruto thought about that. Sure, they were a team, but they didn't really do anything as a team outside of this training ground and missions. Naruto got both their attention before speaking. Why don't we all go get something to eat? You know, as a team. Both Sai and Shizuka looked at Naruto in sudden surprise. Naruto sweet-dropped. He didn't think it was such a strange thing to ask. They were a team after all. Naruto chuckled nervously at the blank expressions. We could go to that ramen shop Ichiruka, it's pretty good. After a few more moments of tense silence, Shizuka nodded. Yeah, sure. Lead the way. 3 miso ramen for me please. 1 seafood ramen please. I'll have what titter the lady is having. Naruto snickered as Sai quickly shut his insult down by the dark glare Shizuka sent his way. After giving the chef their orders, an awkward silence fell over them. neither really knowing what to say or even how to talk to each other. So, Naruto started effectively grabbing the attention of the two genin. Why don't we finally get to know one another? Like what we like and dislike. He finished with a smile. He noticed their hesitant looks and gave an awkward laugh. Okay, how about I go first then? My name is Uzumaki Naruto, my likes are training, being with my friends, turtles and Shisui Nisan. I dislike people who abandon anyone, rapists, the usual. And my dream is to prove everyone wrong about me, and make my sensei proud. He said, his voice turning deathly serious, surprising his two teammates. In the last few weeks they haven't seen Naruto seriously at any moment. Sure, they have only done training exercises and a lot of D-rank missions. But this was something entirely different. It seemed like he was much older, way too old for a 13-year-old. Sai was the first to recover, but he felt something trigger within him. His eyes flashed with an foreign emotion that he hasn't felt in years. My name is Sai. I like to paint, I dislike the same things you do. My dream. I guess I don't have one. What? You don't have a dream? All seriousness, that Naruto previously evaporated in seconds. His hands slammed on the table, making his ramen broth leak out of his bowl as he caught the attention of other occupants within the stand. Naruto didn't waver. Is there nothing you ever wanted to do? Or to be? Naruto asked incredulously. Sai once again felt the unfamiliar, feeling trigger inside him once again. He sat there in stunned silence. Anything he thought he should say died in his throat, his mind going too fast to comprehend an appropriate response. So he said the first thing that meant something to him. My dream is to finish my brother's book. Naruto smiled wide. His eyes turned into upside-down U's. He praised Sai for having a meaningful dream, then looked over at Shizuka. The transfer shinobi gave a deep sigh, not really liking the idea of sharing her personal interests. She never did something like this in her home village. My name is Shizuka. I like training, animals and making dolls. She blushed bright red as she noticed both her teammates raise their eyebrows in shock and confusion, mainly Naruto. I dislike the same things you guys do. Plus some. And my dream is to become the world's strongest kunoichi. Naruto smiled wide over at Shizuka. That's great. See, I told you guys this was gonna be fun. He said with a grin, finally feeling comfortable after a solid conversation. Shizuka crossed her arms around her chest. Her ears turned a tad pink as she told her teammates her secrets. She couldn't deny that it was quite interesting to hear what her teammates actually thought and felt. She looked over at Sai to see his face was more blank than usual. His ramen bowl untouched. After a few moments he looked her way, his face morphing into a large smile doing so. The look is completely gone. She broke out of her musing once Naruto began speaking again. Actually Shizuka, I've been wanting to ask you. What is Nadeshiko like? Naruto asked, bringing up his chopstick to his chin in thought. I've never heard of the village before, how was it over there? Shizuka turned her attention to Naruto, tilting her head at the question. She hummed in thought for a moment before answering him. It wasn't very good in Nadeshiko when I was there. There's this stupid rule where once we graduate the academy, we have to leave the village and search for a strong male shinobi. And if we lose in battle they must come to our village and we get married off to them, she finished with a scowl. Naruto looked at her shocked. What? That's ridiculous. Shizuka nodded her head in agreement. I agree. We are just used to creating stronger heirs for our village, basically livestock. Once we get married off we are forced to retire as shinobi and become full-time wives. Naruto clenched his fists at her explanation. Shaking his head, that's so ridiculous. That village is forcing you guys into a life no one wants. He said, and Shizuka nodded sadly, yes, but that is why I came to Konoha. She said, looking down, a frown on her face. My parents died when I was very young, but they were both originally born in Konoha. While Nadeshiko is technically closer to Kiri, I could have gone there. I wanted to experience the village my parents were raised in, she said. Naruto gave her a sympathetic look. Surprisingly, Sai spoke up, trying his best to give the girl a reassuring pat on the shoulder. It was awkward and strained, but she appreciated it nonetheless. I know what you mean, Shizuka-san. I never knew who my real parents were. I was born in a random little village a few miles from Konoha. But I always heard that they were from the big village that was Konoha. I guess you could say my first real dream is seeing the place they grew up in, he said, allowing them to see just a fraction of his emotions. Naruto nodded as they continued to eat their food in a comfortable silence. After they finished their meal, they walked outside back into the streets of Konoha. Naruto breathed in the fresh air as he stretched his body. Shizuki came next to him. Thanks for inviting us out to eat with you, Naruto. I actually had a good time. She smiled and Sai nodded next to her. Indeed. Maybe we could do that again sometime. Naruto's eyes lit up in glee as he nodded happily. Of course I would be happy too. We are a team after all. Well, if it isn't my little Ototo. Naruto felt himself tense up. Shizuka and Sai both noticed Naruto's body tense up. They turned their heads over to the front of the stand to see the fabled Natsu Namikaze leaning just outside of the stand. A smirk plastered on his face, his chunin vest glowing as he had an open red coat over it. His village headband wrapped around his neck hanging loosely as he crossed his arms around his chest. He held his head up high. His smirk, if possible, seemed to stretch further across his face. His eyes switched over to the rest of the team slowly. You both will have to excuse my little brother here. He gets a bit overzealous most of the time. Naruto clenched his fists as he looked at his brother. His whole family always finds a way to ruin a good day. When he's with friends, his team, or alone time, they always find a way to make his life more and more miserable. He had no words for his brother, wanting his very presence gone from the shop. Shizuka, on the other hand, was showing signs of pure bewilderment. She snapped her head over to Naruto. Wait, brother. Natsu chuckled as he reached over and threw his arm around Shizuka. The black-haired girl blushed from the sudden PDA but couldn't look away from his hypnotizing amethyst eyes staring back at her, mere inches away from her face. Oh, he didn't tell you. I knew it was always hard to be kept under our shadows after all. So I can't blame him. What are you doing here, Natsu? Naruto growled between his teeth, the mere presence of his brother bothering him. Natsu is the one family member he saw the least. He was usually always on missions or training with their mother or father. Natsu grunted as he removed himself from the black-headed girl and grabbed a bag of ramen that was sitting on the counter. To-san asked me to pick up some ramen for the trip. This time Naruto looked back to see his brother. His eyes frowning in confusion. Natsu smirked again. Oh yes, did I forget to mention. To-san and Ka-san are taking me to Mount Myoboku to practice my sage training a year early. Naruto felt his blood run cold. His eyes went wide as Natsu held his head up. Satisfied with the reaction he got from Naruto, he turned to leave the stand. It was great seeing you and your team, Ototo. With one last glance back, his purple eyes darkened considerably. Try to keep up. A tense silence shifted through the air as soon as Natsu left. Naruto's eyes were downcast, his hair falling past his forehead as his teammates stood there awkwardly. Shizuka reacted first as she patted Naruto on the shoulder. Hey, I don't really know what just happened, but... It's fine, Shizuka, Naruto said, interrupting her as he patted her own hand down with his before sliding hers off. I'm used to it, he said, forcing a smile. Unluckily for him, Shizuka shook her head adamantly at him. No can do, Barker. We shared about our family, now it's your turn. So spill. Naruto frowned, sending a slightly pleading look towards the emerald-eyed girl. Can I tell you another time? It's a very long story. Before Shizuka could respond, Sai interjected himself. Yes, maybe next time we go out for lunch, he said. He could tell the blonde wasn't in a good enough mood to talk. Naruto gave Sai an appreciative nod before averting his eyes back to Shizuka. She looked like she was about to protest, but ultimately she gave in. Letting out an irritated sigh, she pointed at the blonde. Fine, but you will tell us. I promise I will, he said before excusing himself and walking away from the ramen stand, leaving his two teammates behind. Shizuka scowled as she turned over to Sai in confusion. Why did you let it go so easily? It seemed to really bother him. And that was Natsu Namikaze. Sai shook his head at her, watching his blonde teammate walk off. Yes, it was. But whatever happened here, it seemed to have affected Blondie-kun deeply. He was in no mood to communicate his feelings, I'm sure you could tell. Shizuka frowned at his answer, turning her head as she followed the back of the blonde. She gave a hesitant nod. Yeah, I could tell. I wonder what happened between them. Sai shrugged. In my time training with the Anbu, I knew that Naruto was related to the Namikazes. But I didn't know they held so much disdain for one another. But the feeling I got from Natsu-san, it wasn't pleasant. Shizuka nodded, agreeing with him. Let's leave Blondie-kun alone for now, Tits-chan. He'll tell us when he's ready. Shizuka couldn't even find it in herself to yell at Sai this time. Can you at least give me a better nickname? I will dwell on the possibility. Okay, spill it, Missy. How did it go? Anko pestered at Kurenai as they walked through the streets of Konoha. Kurenai sighed, rubbing her temples in irritation. I already told you. He just took me to a coffee shop. We talked for about 2 hours and then we parted ways, she said with Anko frowning at her. Jumping in front of Kurenai and walking backwards with her hands behind her head. Ignoring the passersby who looked at her in annoyance. Did you guys kiss at all? Maybe even second base. The purple-haired Kunoiki said, wiggled her eyebrows at Kurenai. Anko. Kurenai quietly yelled at her friend, a small blush forming on her cheeks. Anko snickered at her friend before turning back around. I know, I'm just teasing you, she said before finally coming into view of her favorite dango shop. Her mouth started to water as her eyes started to glisten. She quickly pulled Kurenai inside, grabbing a table by the open window. Kurenai glared at her. Couldn't you have just asked me to hurry it up and not drag me? Anko nodded her head. I could. But why would I? Kurenai sighed in irritation before breaking out into a small smile. Clearly amused by her friend's antics. It was one of the reasons why she loved spending time with Anko. She was always honest, maybe a little too honest. But it added to her charm in Kurenai's opinion. After pushing past her rough exterior, you were met with one of the most selfless human beings you would ever meet. Kurenai knew how high Anko valued her friendships, they were the most important thing to her. And she would always have your back no matter what. Something Kurenai loved her for. As they ordered their food, Kurenai straightened her posture, letting the comforting breeze calm her down. She was silently happy that Anko had picked out a table next to the window. So nothing happened with Asuma, huh? Kurenai sighed as she shrugged her shoulders at her friend, closing her eyes, letting them have a short-lived rest. No, just a regular trip to the coffee shop, she said irritably. Her and Asuma have been flirting back and forth for several months and the man refused to officially ask her out. She was beginning to think he wasn't interested in her anymore. Anko threw her arm over the chair next to her, using a senbon needle to pick at her teeth. Well, can't say I'm surprised. He may act tough, but he's a total pussy, she said, spitting out the piece of food she finally removed from her gums. Do you still even like him at this point? Kurenai had to take a moment to think about it. He was a very sweet man, but he never acted on any of his decisions. So yeah, she liked him. He was one of the only men in Konoha who she would consider boyfriend material. But over the past few months she didn't know if she just liked him as a friend. So Kurenai hesitantly shook her head. I don't know. He's very sweet and treats me like an equal. But he's been more off-putting lately than usual. He doesn't really talk either, and that damned smoking. Anko nodded at her in understanding. Just another bust in Konoha no Sato. If you want to, I can set up a blind date for you. Kurenai felt all the blood drain away from her face. The last time Anko set up a date for here, let's just say it ended with a lot of screaming, a lot of vomit and a passed out sushi chef. Coughing into her fist, she quickly changed subjects. Anyway, how's your genin team? Kurenai asked, regaining her composure. Anko grinned her way. Kurenai was shocked to see a look of pride gleam over her eyes. Kurenai has been curious about Team 11 since the meeting they all had in the Hokage's office 3 weeks ago. Mainly because she was curious about how Naruto was doing. A sullen look glazed her eyes as she recalled how fidgety the Yondaime was at the mention of Naruto during the meeting. I guess things are still dicey with them. I hope he's doing okay. Honestly, I really didn't want to take a genin squad at all. But I'm glad I did, Ku-chan. Those kids are pretty good for being just genin. Their teamwork is still a little rough around the edges, but other than that I have no complaints, she said, grinning. Kurenai nodded. How is Naruto? Anko raised an eyebrow in confusion at the odd question. Turning her attention to Kurenai, tilting her head. Kurenai schooled her emotions as she felt a bead of sweat form on her brow. Only Anko could ever make her uncomfortable by just a simple stare. Anko was about to answer the odd question before her eyes caught a glimpse of a familiar mop of blonde hair walking past the stand. Her face broke out into a devious smirk. "Why don't you ask him yourself?" Standing up abruptly, she pushed past Kurenai, leaning her head out the window. "Anko, what are you?" "Hey Naruto, kuuuuuuun. Over here." Naruto jumped in surprise in the street as he snapped his head around, looking for where the scream came from. The blonde looked to his left to see his sensei practically falling out of a window, waving her hands in his direction. Looking past her, he was able to catch a glimpse of very familiar crimson-red eyes that left such a powerful impression on him years ago. He felt his cheeks start to heat up as he looked at the lady next to his sensei. She was wearing a tight bandage-looking battle dress with bandages wrapped around her arms, stopping just before her forearm. Kurenai-san. He thought as his mind started to go blank the longer he stared in her direction, his sensei completely forgotten. She was breathtaking, he had never seen someone so beautiful before. While he knew she was beautiful when he saw her 5 years ago, but he didn't really think much of it back then. After all, he was only a child. Anko watched as he froze in the street. "You gonna stand there all damn day? Hurry in here," she yelled, breaking Naruto out of his trance as he rushed into the dango shop, looking at Anko. "Sorry Anko-sensei," he said, bringing his hand up to scratch the back of his head. Kurenai looked at the boy as he and Anko started to talk. She looked him up and down. Wow, he really grew up. He almost looks like a completely different person, she thought as she smiled at seeing him scratch his head. A habit he seemed to have kept all these years. Moving her eyes up his body, she couldn't help but notice the large scar over his left eye. She swallowed back a gasp as she traced it with her eyes. Something sparked within her, she wanted to reach out and wipe away the imaginary tears on his face. Like she had done all those years ago. "Anyway, Gaki-ku-chan here was actually just asking about you," Anko said, drawing her attention, making Naruto blush a bit. Naruto turned towards Kurenai as she nodded. "Yes, I wanted to see how you were doing, it's been a long time after all," she said, offering a smile making him return it with ease. Anko tilted her head, more confused now than she was before. She didn't know that Kurenai knew Naruto. Deciding to be a good friend for once, she stood up from her seat. "Well, it seems you two kids have some catching up to do. So I'll leave you to it," she said as Kurenai looked at Anko sadly. She did feel bad, she and Anko hadn't hung out in a long time and she knew her purple-headed friend was looking forward to it. Anko swatted her hand, as Anko gave her a grin. "Don't worry about lil ol, me-ku-chan. We can meet up later. I'm gonna go piss off Kakashi," she said before winking and leaving the stand. Kurenai sighed as she watched her friend walk out, promising to make it up to her. Naruto laughed awkwardly, standing near the table. "Sorry about that, Kurenai-san. I didn't mean to interrupt anything," she offered a small smile before motioning the blonde to sit across from her. "Don't apologize. We are the ones who called you over after all." Naruto nodded before taking his seat at the table. They began to catch up on what's new with them in the past 5 years. From Naruto becoming a genin and Kurenai passing her Junin exams. Minutes soon turned to hours as they stayed in the food stand enjoying the pleasant company. They got on the topic of genjutsu and she was excited to hear that he kept up his rigorous training and was slowly getting better and better each day. She told him how Anko bragged about him in the meeting with the Hokage that he managed to catch her in hand seal-less genjutsu. Naruto blushed at the praise, making Kurenai giggle slightly, finding his blush to be incredibly cute. Getting lost in mindless chatter, they were soon kicked out of the stand, staying well past closing time. Naruto offered to walk her home and she agreed, touched by his kind gesture. On the way to her apartment, she couldn't help but sneak a peek back at the boy. She was pleasantly surprised by how much she enjoyed her night tonight. While she only thought they were going to just talk for almost an hour, they ended up spending more than half of the evening at the shop. So long in fact that they decided to even have dinner there. He was all in all, a perfect gentleman. Even though this wasn't a date, she had wished that the last date she had went as good as this. Asuma had never walked her home before. But her mind quickly switched topics. "Say Naruto-kun, can I ask you something?" Naruto nodded his head at her. Kurenai went silent for a moment, trying her best to figure out what words she wanted to say exactly. How is everything going, with your family? She said softly, making Naruto look down to the floor. Kurenai after a moment turned her head to see that Naruto had stopped walking and was frozen in place. Kurenai was about to apologize, but Naruto spoke up before she could. Clenching his fists tightly, he looked at the ground, biting his lip. Everything is alright, Kurenai-san. Same old, same old. Kurenai felt her eyes soften before grabbing his arm. Naruto looked up at her in confusion as she guided him to a small bench. Take a seat, Naruto-kun, she said, making Naruto glance in confusion, but I was just supposed to walk you home. Kurenai nodded before pointing to her right. My apartment is right around the corner. But now I just wanna talk. He nodded his head and took the seat directly next to her. Putting his hands together as he sat awkwardly next to Kurenai. It was tense on the bench, neither knowing really how to spark up such a serious topic. It was dark outside, their only source of light was the street lamp that resided next to the bench. Kurenai took several deep breaths before shifting her body to the blonde boy. Do you wanna talk about it? Naruto stayed silent as he tightened his hands together. He didn't want to burden Kurenai with his life, he felt bad already delaying their trip because of his problems. But he knew the longer he let this sit and marinate in his mind, it would soon explode on him. Shutting his eyes, his scar pulsing with phantom pain as his stomach sent flips internally within him. It's just, he started out, Kurenai giving him her full attention. Once Shisui Nissan died, I was really hoping things would get better. I was praying, I really needed someone there for me. I made friends at the academy. But no one could ever replace Shisui Nissan, he said. His voice cracking several times during his speech. His body hunching over as he let out a quiet sob. Everything just got worse. Natsu and Narumi managed to graduate early, leaving me behind. My parents pulled even further away, if that was even possible, and I lost support from the only person who was there for me. No one wants me, everyone always leaves me, I guess. I'm just not special enough, he said as more and more sobs escaped his throat. Kurenai looked at Naruto with a heavy heart. Her own heart breaking at the very sight of him. She watched as the dam holding back his true feelings started to crack, letting his emotions leak out. Kurenai softly removed his hands from the grip and intertwined their hands together. Naruto-kun, look at me. Naruto remained still as he tried to calm down his erratic breathing. He didn't want to look at her, he already felt bad enough putting her through this. She probably hated him for it, she probably wanted to chastise him for being such a baby, for crying about all the bad things going on in his life. Please. Her voice was soft, it felt like silk as it left her soft lips and floated themselves over Naruto's skin. Naruto felt his pulse quicken as he slowly lifted his eyes, expecting to see disappointment and anger. It surprised him greatly when her crimson eyes held nothing but warmth. It was almost intoxicating to look at. He felt his cheeks start to heat up from her stare, his eyes couldn't help but drift down to her soft red-laced lips. She released one of her hands, bringing it up to Naruto's left eye. Slowly wiping away his remaining tears as she looked at his beautiful blue eyes. Her thumb slowly caressing the bottom of his scar tenderly. Don't say things like that, Naruto-kun. Your family is just full of idiots. You are one of the most special, strongest people I have ever met. And you could use this time to be you, the you that you want to be, she said, offering the boy a smile filled with so much warmth. Hell, if I had to go through what you did, I wouldn't have even made it a day, she chuckled to herself. Naruto sat there quietly, letting her words echo through his mind. His stomach started to calm down a bit as he leaned slightly into her touch. And just remember, Naruto-kun, you have a duty to prove them wrong, right? Naruto widened his eyes a bit as he turned his gaze back onto Kurenai. The corner of his lips started to lift upwards as he nodded to Kurenai. His eyes shining with newfound determination. Yeah, that's right. Okay, my cute genin. This mission is very easy, so I better not hear any complaining. We are to deliver this letter. The purple-headed Junin of Team 11 raises her arm to show the neatly packaged letter in her hand. To the mayor of Tsuna town, her name is Maikisu and the town is only about a few hours away. And this is our first sea tank mission. Anko explained loudly, throwing her arms up in the air in emphasis, hoping to see her slaves Genin yell in excitement with her. She pouted when she saw that all three were wearing the exact same look of melancholic, thoughtful expressions on their faces. Shizuka was the only one who showed any real excitement about the mission as she broke out into a small grin. Coughing into her fist, she frowned. "You guys are boring," she said with a pout, making all three genin sweet drop. Without waiting for a response, Anko took the lead in front, Sai and Shizuka flaking her sides with Naruto watching the back. A comfortable silence fell over the team as Naruto was lost in his own thoughts. His mind wandered back to last night's events. Talking with Kurenai, he couldn't help but smile as he recalled her words. She was right, he needed to push past this and show them exactly what they were missing. He was thankful he talked with her, she even agreed to train him in genjutsu once he returned from his mission. He was ecstatic to hear that and was already looking forward to coming back. He took this time to look around the forest as him and his team ventured further in. It was his first time out of the village. It felt kinda surreal to finally escape the walls of Konoha. It was almost freeing in a way. Anko's voice broke him out of his trance. "Okay team, we are about 4 hours away from Tsuna town. We're gonna make a small campfire and get there first thing tomorrow morning." Anko explained, then went ahead and gave everyone little duties in order to set up camp. Sai was in charge of getting firewood, Shizuka was to put together the tents, and Naruto to distribute the food. Naruto finished his task fairly quickly and sat on one of the wooden tree stumps, idly waiting for his team to finish their respective tasks. His eyes scanning over his team, he would make sure to apologize to them later on for rudely brushing them off yesterday. "Hey kid, how was your date with Kurenai-chan last night?" Anko said, effectively getting the attention of all three genin as she looked down at Naruto, arms crossed over her chest as she grinned. Naruto blushed deeply, his face resembling that of a ripe tomato. "AD date," Shizuka muttered, looking up at Naruto in shock, the tent falling out of her hand. Naruto waved his hands in defense, rapidly shaking his head. "It wasn't a date. We just talked, that was all." Anko tried to fight back a laugh as she saw his face explode in embarrassment. She wished she brought her camera. She shrugged her shoulders, taking the seat next to him. "I don't know about that, Naruto-kun, you guys were out for quite a long time." "Kurenai-san, isn't she the sensei of Team 8? Sai said, his hand coming up to his chin in thought. Shizuka's eyes, if possible, grew even wider. Sai hummed as he dropped the firewood he was holding, giving a nod of approval. "I didn't think you were into older woman, Blondie-kun. I'm not. And it wasn't a date, damn it. We just happened to know each other," he said, trying his best to fight back his aggressive blush. Shizuka shook off her shock before continuing to set up the tent. Anko started to laugh before smacking Naruto in the back. The blonde yelped slightly at the impact. "Just messing with you, kid. Slightly," she said, whispering the last part before rubbing her neck. "Actually, Blondie-kun, how do you know Ku-chan?" she said, her curiosity piqued as she put a hand on her knee. This seemed to grab the others' attention as well as they nodded in agreement. Naruto sighed to himself as he managed to get rid of his blush. Looking up, he told Shizuka and Sai to take a seat. He did promise he would tell them everything. "And we are a team after all." And so he told them everything, from his family's treatment to his meeting with Shisui, and when he first met Kurenai all those years ago. As he finished his talk, he took in a deep breath, feeling somewhat good to get it all out again. Looking up, he was met with the speechless looks from his team. "And that's how you got that?" Shizuka said, pointing to her own left eye as Naruto nodded. A sad smile on his face. "Yeah, jumped in front of a kunai in fear for Shisui-nisan. Whoever he was fighting wasn't phased in the slightest and sliced at my open eye. I was lucky enough that he didn't do enough damage to blind me." He lied, not willing to share his biggest secret. He brought his hand up, rubbing it slightly. Anko spoke up this time, her usually laid-back and playful attitude gone. "I can't believe it, Hokage-sama," she muttered, shaking her head in disbelief. "How did you deal with it, Naruto?" "With your family," Sai said, cutting into the conversation. His expression unreadable. Naruto blinked in thought before staring deep into the bright orange flames of their campfire. After a while he shook his head. "I haven't, I'm still trying to. But last night I was told something very important. That I have to focus on myself, to prove them all wrong. I know that I'll never be a part of that family, which is why I dropped the Namika's name." He smiled a bittersweet smile as he rubbed the back of his head. "Doesn't it bother you?" Shizuka asked unexpectedly. Her voice raised quite a bit as both male teammates and Anko were taken aback at her sudden outburst. Shizuka had the audacity to look sheepish as her cheeks turned into a light shade of pink. She gave an awkward smile as she muttered a soft apology. Naruto slowly nodded his head at her, ignoring her apology. Well, of course it bothers me, he said, his teeth clenching, but I tried to get on the good side countless times. I tried to be there as much as I could. But there's only so much I can do. So you gave up. Surprisingly, it was Sai that asked this question. Naruto looked shocked at his question as a loud silence fell over the genin. Sai never took his eyes off the blonde. Naruto digested what was said to him. He looked down into the burning fire. Sai's stare was starting to make him uncomfortable. No, I wouldn't say I gave up. I just accepted it. Sai widened his eyes as he sat there in silence. In fact, no one else knew what to say as they sat listening to the crackling fire. Anko suddenly clapped her hands, her face morphing back into her usual playful attitude, throwing her arm around Naruto's shoulder. Ah, who needs them anyway? And don't act all mopey Barker. Don't forget that you're part of something great here. The soon-to-be strongest team in Konoha with the hottest sensei around, she said, nudging the blonde as she pointed a thumb over to Sai and Shizuka. Naruto looked at her shocked before looking into the equally shocked eyes of his team. They all looked at each other, nodding to themselves. The atmosphere seemed to change as they exchanged glances. Now they felt like a real team. Yeah, you're right, Anko-sensei. So let's get this party started, shall we? Who's ready for guard duty? All three genin groaned. Morning came very quickly for Team 11. After Anko gave them the rundown for guard duty, all genin took 3-hour intervals while rotating. It was highly effective and each for a good amount of sleep to feel refreshed when they woke up. It didn't take them long to pack up their remaining items and continue on the road to Tsuna town. It was a beautiful day, the grass was shining and there was a light breeze making the giant trees sway regally. Flowers were starting to wilt, a lot of them already losing their color and stooping down, only being kept alive by the sun rays. Shizuka and Anko made small talk as they stayed in formation A. Anko in the front, Shizuka on the left, Naruto on the right and Sai to the back. Naruto looked around the forest. The further and further they got from Konoha, the more beautiful it seemed to become. There were more wildlife running around as he watched several rabbits run around the trees and sip water from several small puddles around the area. Looking up, it was met with the scorching summer sun blazing down on him. He slightly envied Sai at this moment, having a shirt that only covered half his stomach. Anko stopped her track as she turned back to the genin, motioning them to look behind her as she waved her hand regally. Ladies and gentlemen, Tsuna town, Anko said as the gates to the town finally came into view. The gates were not as large as Konoha's, but it was still impressive. Walking right through the gates, they noticed that the town was bustling with life. People were running around with shopping bags and several stands were trying their best to get you to buy their products. Naruto looked around the town with growing excitement. It was a relatively small town, but the amount of life and energy was shared the moment they walked inside. Following Anko's lead, they finally stopped Thea walking in front of the largest building in the whole town. Anko turned back to the kids, nodding her head. You guys ready? Seeing all three genin nod, she grabbed the doorknob, pushing the door open. Walking inside was almost like walking through to a different dimension. The room was a dark brown color as several pictures hung on the wall with people Naruto didn't recognize. In the corner were several chairs with a nightstand with magazines stacked on top on one another. The air even felt more proper, more refined. Ah, Shinobi-san, are you here to see Kisu-sama? A voice said as Naruto turned his head to see a blonde woman behind a desk, a smile plastered on her face. Anko nodded before reaching into her pouch and pulling the letter the Hokage had given her. Yes, I need to hand-deliver this letter Hokage-sama had written personally. The blonde woman nodded before offering another one of her smiles. After a moment of looking over some papers on her desk, she pointed to the large door across from them. Yes, of course. She is right through those doors. But there is another Konoha shinobi here, so your time might be cut short just a bit. Anko raised an eyebrow at that. The girl continued, if you would like, I can schedule a meeting with Kisu-sama for tomorrow morning. Anko waved her hand. No, that's okay, we don't need much time with her anyway. The blonde woman nodded before they walked into the spacious room. Kisu was sitting behind her desk with a nervous look on her face. her hands intertwined as she was reading a document in front of her. Standing next to the desk was an all too familiar person. Naruto widened his eyes as he saw the person's very own blue eyes raise in shock at his entrance. Kisu looked up from her desk and lit up as she saw the team. "Ah, Shinobi-san," she said, getting up from her seat and offering Anko a handshake. Anko snapped out of her own shock and returned the gesture. Handing the letter over to Kisu, "A pleasure, Kisu-san. We were asked to deliver this letter to you from Hokage-sama himself." Kisu nodded before turning back to the shinobi who was by her desk, her face going back to worry. "Narumi-san, do you think these shinobi will be enough?" The now identified Narumi tore her eyes away from her brother as she looked back to Kisu. She stayed silent for a few moments. "I'm not sure, I haven't worked with any of these shinobi before," she said as rising guilt erupted in her stomach as she looked back to her brother. Sadly, she knew absolutely nothing about her brother's skill as a shinobi. Anko, while never working with her personally, knew she was more than just a capable shinobi. She was trained personally by Orochimaru of the Sennin, before his defection. The other two on the squad she knew nothing about, not even the names. "Enough for what exactly?" Anko spoke up, crossing her arms over her chest, narrowing her eyes at Narumi, making the girl blink in confusion. Kisu rubbed her arm as she looked down at the ground nervously. "Well, you see," she said, not sure how to exactly put her thoughts into words. "It seems people are targeting me in this town, bad people." She finished, making Anko raise an eyebrow. "What, like some bandits? We can take care of that easily." Narumi shook her head in response, grabbing the document on Kisu's desk and showing it to Anko. "Worse, after my mission I was supposed to deliver this letter back to Kisu-san, but," she said, flipping the page over. All three genin perked up at this as Narumi channeled chakra into the page, making words that weren't previously there before appear diagonally across. Anko leaned in, her eyes scanning over the page. Her eyes lit up in recognition. "The blue flames," Anko said. Narumi nodded, placing the page back onto Kisu's desk. "Yes, apparently they have been seen venturing around Tsuna town for a while now. I suspect they will target Tsuna next." Shizuka shook her head confused. "Wait, who are these blue flames?" she said. She had never heard that name before in her life. "The Blue Flames, a B-class group of rogue ninja that go around targeting smaller towns and villages in order to seize control of them. They specialize in fire jutsu and are remarkable at assassination techniques. They will kill anyone who gets in their way. They are pure evil." Sai spoke up as he crossed his arms. His eyes closed as he relayed the information. Narumi looked at him in mild shock before masking it. She nodded her head again. Sai hummed, "But what use would they have in targeting Tsuna town?" he asked, opening his eyes looking at Kisu. The woman flinched as the boy's piercing black eyes stared back at her. She forced herself to look away. All eyes were on her now as she played with a piece of brown hair that was framing her face. I don't know. We are a trading town. We trade our wood for goods like fish and livestock. Unless they want to take over our trades as well," she asked as she placed a hand on her chest. "Calm down, Kisu-san. Getting worked up now will only cause more problems," Narumi said as she tried to calm down the shaking mare. "What kind of wood does your town gather, Kisu-san?" Anko asked as the now calmer Kisu looked up at her. Kisu tilted her head. "We have an abundant supply of genus wood, so that's our main trading material." "Genus wood," Naruto spoke up for the first time as he looked up shocked. His team looked back at him in confusion as Naruto began to slowly walk towards Kisu's desk. "Is your desk also made out of genus wood?" Kisu frowned and nodded her head. Narumi scowled at her brother, shaking her head exaggeratedly. There was a real problem here and all he could think about was the craftsmanship of her desk. Naruto knew there are more impor. Genus wood is very chakra conductive, with enough you can even make it harder than steel, and even so resilient where it won't even break, he said, stopping Narumi in her tracks. His eyes traced over to his and she couldn't help but stare back. Blue eyes that looked so foreign to her, she couldn't recognize the boy as he looked at her. He was a complete and utter stranger. Slightly backing down from his gaze, she nodded her head. Naruto grabbed the edge of the desk, channeling chakra through it. The desk started to glow a soft blue color before the light-colored wood started to change into a deep black. Kisu gasped, throwing her hand over her mouth. "That's what they're after. With enough of this wood they could make weapons, armor, and who knows what else. Naruto said, removing his hand from the desk, letting it revert back to its original light color. Kisu looked down at Naruto, her eyes wide in need. Will you guys help and take down this group? Please, I don't want anything to happen to this town. Naruto shifted awkwardly as he looked back to Anko. The purple-haired Junin seemed to be in deep thought. While she wanted to help Tsuna town, she didn't know if her team was officially qualified for it. If they weren't here, then it would be no problem. Hell, she and Narumi would be able to take him out. Looking back to Sai and Shizuka, they both already had battle experience. Sai was in Anbu before the team was created, and Shizuka was a genin in her previous village for about a year. But Naruto, she thought as she looked back at him. She knew he was good for a genin, better than he gave himself credit for. Yet he lacked battle experience, but as she looked into his eyes she saw this fire of determination that was unyielding. Taking one last glance to Narumi told her all she needed to know. Anko nodded before offering Kisu a grin. Well, what can I say? Team 11 is on the case. Kisu had tears in her eyes as she bowed deeply to the shinobi in her office, showing her gratitude, making Team 11 smile happily. Narumi coughed, grabbing everyone's attention. Kisu-san, do you maybe have a spare room where we could discuss the mission details? Kisu nodded enthusiastically. How about you use my office? I will go and check up on things in the village, and I'll inform Suzy at the front desk. Please take your time. Narumi nodded as Kisu quickly excused herself, leaving Narumi alone with Team 11. Fighting back a frown as she noticed her brother walk up to Shizuka. Narumi pushed her thoughts into the back of her head as Anko walked up, grabbing the document again and looking it over. Rubbing her chin in thought. Narumi-san, when did you get this? Yesterday evening. When I returned from the cabin, Kisu-san was already asleep, so I had to wait till the morning to tell her. Anko nodded her head, looking up, staring out of the lone window in the room. Sai walked up to her, peeking over her shoulder. What does the note say exactly? Pillage and take all. Are we sure this isn't just a huge ploy? Shizuka said, leaning on the wall. Her eyes closed in thought. Narumi shook her head, leaning on the desk, her nails drawing circles on the wood in thought. The blue flames have never been one to back down from a threat. It seems this letter was meant for someone else entirely until I got my hands on it, she said, making Anko nod. The purple-haired woman pointed to the corner of the page. There are coordinates here, it isn't that far away from here. I went there last night. It's another small cabin. There were about 10 shinobi guarding the entrance. Whatever is in there, they don't want anyone finding it, Narumi said, taking a peek over at her brother. He was standing next to Anko with a hand in his pocket. His eyes were narrowed in thought. Naruto-ni, how do you know about genus wood? Naruto shrugged as he looked away from her. Shisui-ni-san taught me about a bunch of different materials that are good for weapon making, he said, ending the conversation, making Narumi frown. She instinctively clenched her fists around the desk in irritation. Her nails dragged across the wood, letting the unpleasant sound quietly echo under the desk. Anko sensed the atmosphere start to change and quickly intervened, stepping closer to Narumi, handing her the paper. The Namika's girl grabbed hold of the page before Anko began to speak. So what was your plan before we arrived? I was gonna message Tusan and see if he could possibly send backup, no more than a team or two. While there seems to be quite a number of them, they don't seem to be very strong. The strongest seem to be about a chunin in terms of strength. Anko nodded before looking back over to her team. She knew Sai and Shizuka could handle themselves well, but part of her wanted to back off this mission for Naruto's sake. She was confident in his abilities as a shinobi. He seemed to be improving faster than Sai and Shizuka during training. Damn kid, don't make me regret doing this, Anko thought as she looked back to Narumi, following her eyes as she glanced over to Naruto. No doubt the redhead was thinking the same thing. Anko scoffed at that. Then when the sun starts to set, we will make our move on them. We will divide up into 2 teams. Naruto and Shizuka will be with me, and Narumi and Sai will partner up. In all due respect, Anko-san, but I think I would be best paired with Naruto-ni. Anko narrowed her eyes at the girl, crossing her arms over her chest. Naruto felt his spine stiffen as he looked over at his sister in shock. Narumi felt her resolve start to crumble as all eyes were now fixated onto her. Even her brother was giving her a suspicious look. Shizuka scowled in her direction, tightening her arms around herself. And why do you believe that Narumi-san? Naruto-kun here has worked longer with his team than anyone else here. So I believe my assignment was for the best, she said, making Narumi physically flinch at the Junin. She lowered her head and clenched her fists, her hands starting to turn pale. I don't mind Anko-sensei. Narumi snapped her head over in shock to Naruto, her eyes perking up as a smile started to form on her face. The rest of Team 11 looked at him in shock however. Anko started at Naruto, her eyes shining with confusion as they locked eyes. Naruto kept his face blank as he nodded to his sensei, the both of them sharing a silent conversation. Anko after a while reluctantly nodded her head to the blonde, biting her lips slightly. Fine. Shizuka and Sai with me, and Naruto and Narumi together. We will meet in the forest just outside the cabin at sunset. Several hours flew by for Team 11 and the newest member for the mission. The sun was starting to set basking over Tsuna town. The team all huddled together in the trees, scanning the area. Making no sound, the group moved closer until the cabin they were looking for finally came into view. Stopping in a bushel, Anko raised her hands, stopping the group. Thanks to the sunset, the forest was darker than usual with a tiny bit of light shining through the cabin's windows. Several shinobi stalked the outside perimeter as they walked rhythmically paced back and forth, at least a group of 10. Anko shifted her eyes to the outlining trees, trying to sense another shinobi who could have possibly been hiding. If her plan works, then they should be able to finish this mission without any difficulty. Letting herself bask in the darkness for a moment longer, she let her eyes linger back to his team. Sai, in 5 minuets I want you to make several birds to distract the guards on the left-hand side. Once distracted, I want you Shizuka to kill all those distracted as we make our way to the inside. Narumi and Naruto, I trust you both to do the same on your side, understand? Do not start until you hear Shizuka make her move. I sense no other shinobi hidden anywhere, so it should go smoothly. All the kids nodded before Sai, Shizuka and Anko all disappeared from sight, Anko taking a moment longer to give Naruto a reassuring nod of her head. The forest was eerily silent as Narumi and Naruto ventured further to the right, watching the 5 guards wander around. Narumi gave Naruto a sideways glance as they crouched in silence. Naruto didn't look at her at all since the meeting in Kisu's room and was nowhere to be seen until it was time to meet for their mission. While it would have been fairly easy for her to sense his chakra, she didn't know what his chakra signature felt like. It was foreign, almost indistinguishable. Narumi was happy that he chose to work with her on this mission, and that he even agreed to her decision on being her partner on her team. But the longer she stayed with him, the more she didn't seem to know about her brother. Each passing second seemed like an eternity. She had no idea of his skill set, his speed, what he was capable of. Had he even made his first kill? Or was this his first mission outside the village? He was only a genin after all. That mere thought alone sent waves of guilt through her. We left you behind, didn't we? How do you suppose we take out the guards? Narumi blinked in surprise as Naruto's voice reached her ears. Naruto was looking straight ahead, his eyes narrowed in thought as he scanned the area. Narumi snapped her train of thought, letting it reverie back to the task at hand. Humming in thought, she brought her a hand to her chin. Once Shizuka-san strikes, I can flank them from the back. Can you distract them from the front? Narumi said as her eyes stayed locked onto Naruto. Her voice was strong, not a single trace of worry laced in her words. Naruto didn't look at her as he shook his head, his hand reaching into the pouch on his hip, taking out several kunai. Narumi scowled at her brother. Was he defying her orders? Naruto, look, all you have to do is. There's no need, Narumi, watch. Kunai in hand, he formed 2 hand seals as he closed his eyes, taking in a deep breath. Narumi watched in silence as the sound of wings flapping averted her attention. Looking up, she noticed several white and black birds flying overhead. Narumi, who was informed of Sai's unique style of ninjutsu, wasn't surprised. Scowling at her brother again, she was about to scold him that they had to make their move. But her eyes widened as a quiet choke echoed through the forest. Turning her head back, she saw the 5 guards on their side all reach up, holding their necks. The gagging only seemed to get worse as one by one all fell to their knees, clutching their throats trying to catch their breath. Narumi's eyes widened even further as she heard her brother stand up next to her. Naruto finally breathed out before finally letting his eyes look at his sister. Diminishing air genjutsu. All the guards think they suffocated to death, he said as he walked past Narumi, leaving the dumbstruck redhead behind. Narumi watched her brothers retreating back in shock as he walked over to the down guards, his kunai ready as he bent down, placing the kunai at the guard's neck. Naruto's body seemed to freeze, his grip tightened around his kunai. Naruto looked at the body, doubt overtaking his system as he felt his hand began to shake. Narumi looked at Naruto, a frown etched on her face. He's hesitating. Suddenly Narumi felt a sudden pulse of chakra, ripping her eyes off her brother as the sensation got closer as a large fireball came flying out of the forest. Narumi reacted quickly, throwing her shock away as she ran to Naruto. Naruto's head snapped up as he noticed the ball of fire come closer before he was tackled to the side by Narumi. The ball of fire sizzled past them as loud screams of agony echoed through the clearing as the guards on the floor exploded into flames. Before the two Namikazes had time to react, another fireball came hurtling their way. Naruto and Narumi were more prepared this time, both jumping to either side dodging the attack. Well, I wasn't expecting you two to actually dodge the second one. I can say I'm pleasantly surprised. The kids looked up to see a tall man standing across from them, arms crossed over his chest as he grinned down at the younger shinobi. His yellow eyes glowed with amusement, letting the area around them burn. Narumi schooled her emotions as she quickly brought out a kunai of her own, her blue eyes held no emotion as she stood tall. Naruto getting up, standing next to her. Please, it was only 2 fireballs, I've seen much worse, she said, making the older man cackle with laughter, his deep laughs echoing into the night. You got spunked, kid, it's gonna be a shame killing you, he said, his voice going deadly serious, snapping his fingers as 13 shinobi jumped from the trees, all wearing crazed expressions, making the two Namikazes tense up. Narumi spared a nervous glance to her brother, noticing the bead of sweat sliding down his forehead. Without warning, the 13 shinobi took off racing towards Narumi, effectively separating her from Naruto. Shit, Naruto, Narumi cursed, leaping out of the way from a noticeably smaller fireball that was sent her way. Ha, come on missy, why even try to fight back? I promise we'll go easy on ya if ya just give yourself up, one of the thugs said, an unkempt grin plastered on his face. Yeah, might as well just surrender now, sweet thing. Several of the others spoke out in agreement as Narumi scowled in disgust as she traced over her attackers. It seems I'm going to have to make this quick. I don't want to leave my brother for too long. Hurrah. So the bitch is confident. I'll show you who's boss, the one in front yelled, his eyes flashing with anger as he sprinted off towards Narumi, sword raised high above his head. Narumi waited till the man was close and gathered wind chakra into her hand. Without hesitation she thrust her hand into the stomach of her attacker. The man yelled out in pain as his sword slipped out of his hand, his body slumping over lifeless. The remaining guards didn't hesitate, seeing one of their own die, and all charged her at once. Narumi sighed, noticing that Naruto and that strange man were nowhere to be seen, most likely out in the forest. Narumi brought her forearm up, blocking a kick that was sent her way. The thug closest to her went in for the kill, aiming a kunai into her chest. Narumi extended her arm, gripping the attacker's wrist before his hand could make contact, bending it back, snapping his arm and pushing it forward, forcing the kunai deep into the man's throat. That's 2. Using her momentum she quickly twirled around, grabbing the shinobi's leg that previously kicked her and throwing him backwards into 2 oncoming shinobi. Flying through hand seals, she took in a deep breath of air. Wind style, great breakthrough. Breathing out a large gust of wind at the 3 slow shinobi as it cut them up, killing them instantly, their bodies hacked up and flying backwards. 5. Feeling a sudden chakra pulse from her left, she channeled chakra into her kunai. The bladed weapon took on a dark blue glow as it extended several inches. The man breathed in heavily, sending out another fireball. Narumi threw the wind-infused kunai at the middle of the ball of fire, making it fly directly through, hitting the man right in the heart. The fire lost its form, breaking apart in the middle and flying around the redhead, burning up another shinobi that tried to strike from her right. 7. The remaining 6 all stood several feet from her. The majority of the group were looking down at Narumi in fear, physically shaking in place, trembling as the emotionless eyes of Narumi stared back at them. This is your last chance, either leave here, or die here. One of the shinobi gasped in fear as he dropped his sword and took off in a random direction. Soon after, two more followed after. 10. Why you monster? I'll kill you. A man yelled, making Narumi chuckle to herself, raising a hand over her face, freaking out the remaining 3 shinobi. You blue flames are the monsters. But I'll show you what a real monster looks like, she said, her voice dropping several octaves as they watched her eyes shift. Blue irises turning into red slitted ones. Narumi gave a toothy grin, showing her extended canine teeth as she dissipated from sight, the only trace left of her being a soft breeze. Where did you gahhh? The man couldn't get the next words out as he looked down to see several kunai embedded in his body. Narumi looked up at the man, arms extended, gripping the remaining 2 shinobi in her grasp. Slamming their heads together, they fell to the floor, not having any time to react. The 2 shinobi suddenly heard a sizzling sound, looking up at Narumi, both of her hands extended as blue chakra started to form in both palms of her hand. Her piercing crimson eyes rippled through them. 13. Rasengan, she yelled, slamming the spinning balls of chakra into the remaining 2, ignoring their screams of pain as they withered in her grasp, falling to the ground dead. Narumi retracted her hands, letting her eyes revert back to her normal cerulean. You went a little overboard there. Narumi shrugged her shoulders, the loud voice booming in her head that she had grown accustomed to after all these years speaking to her. It was more of a message to the blue flames. They won't target Tsuna again. The deep voice hummed in her mind, agreeing with the girl before speaking again. You should probably check up on your brother, or the rest of your team. Narumi didn't need to be told twice. Before the voice even finished speaking, she leaped away into the forest, trying to sense her brother's chakra signature. She hated this feeling, the feeling that something bad might have happened to Naruto. And it would have been her fault for not protecting him. Please be alright, Naruto ni. With Naruto, after the separation. Naruto felt his hands tighten around his kunai as he stared off at the taller man, sweat beading down his brow and falling down his cheek. Watching his sister get separated from him sent a wave of anxiety through his body. His breath hitched as he saw the man start to laugh to himself, running a hand through his dark black hair. My, you seem like much easier prey than that girl. His voice was deep, making Naruto's head vibrate in worry. This was his first real encounter with an enemy shinobi, a real shinobi. It was easy for him to put the low-level guards in a genjutsu since he knew they were about his level of strength, a genin. But looking at the man in front of him now, the towering physique of muscle that stood clearly over 6 feet. It scared him. He tried to gather his erratic breathing, trying to stay composed as he racked his to figure out a way to fight this shinobi. His hands started to sweat while his legs shook in fear. The taller man reached behind his back, pulling out a large sword and aiming it at the blonde. The sword glowed in the dark as he rotated it, letting it glimmer in the darkened night. It seems I'll have to teach you a lesson for attacking the blue flames. My name is Sokka Shin, prepare to die. Sokka moved forward several steps as he lunged towards Naruto. Shit, Naruto thought, bringing up his kunai, stopping the sword from ending his life. Sokka grinned, applying more pressure to his blade, making Naruto grit his teeth. His arms started to tremble from the force as he broke contact, rolling to the side. Sokka, feeling the blonde retreat, his blade hit the ground before kicking the blonde directly in the stomach. Naruto gasped in pain as he felt his body soar through the clearing as his back connected to a tree with a loud thud. Wincing from the sudden pain, he widened his eyes as a large blue fireball came soaring his way. Acting quick, he jumped to his feet. Water style, water shield jutsu. Naruto called out, waving his arm in a circular motion as a shield made of pure water formed from his fingertips, attempting to stop the jutsu. The ball of fire made contact with his shield and Naruto felt his knees start to buckle from the sudden force. He channeled more chakra into his shield in hopes to stop the attack head-on. Naruto widened his eyes as the fire jutsu proved to be more resilient than his. Naruto's jutsu broke, splashing his body as the explosion sent him tumbling to the ground again. Naruto sneered as he tried to grasp the grass beneath him. The water from his jutsu had burnt him after exploding thanks to the fireball. Naruto hopped to his feet, glaring at the shinobi across from him in barely controlled rage, not wanting to let the pain show. He wanted to wipe that smug expression right off of Sokka's face. Sokka gave a laugh that gave the opposing blonde a cold chill. Do you really think you have a chance to beat me, boy? You have been nothing but average, and I'm being generous, he said smoothly, his eyes glowing with disappointment. Naruto scoffed as he bit his lip to stop it from tremblingly. Holding his side that the water had burnt him on, can I really not do anything against him? I have my Sharingan, but I can't catch a glimpse of his eyes. His hair keeps falling into his face and he's way too fast for me. He let his thoughts wander, clenching his fists as desperation gripped his very soul. Sokka was strong, stronger than he had anticipated. And for his first real fight, Sokka was the pure embodiment of a devil. While he did have some tricks up his sleeve that Shisui had left for him in the scroll, but he wasn't close to mastering it and would most likely be more of a hindrance. He didn't have the chakra control for it, or the right chakra ratio for the jutsu itself. So he did the only thing that felt right for him. You're too cocky for your own good. Water style, spinning top. Naruto yelled, forming water at his fingertips while spinning his body. His body became engulfed with water as he shot off towards Sokka, spinning widely. Sokka just sighed as he sidestepped, forcing his hand through the blonde's jutsu, slapping Naruto as the jutsu broke, sending Naruto to the floor once again. Naruto turned just in time to roll out of the way from a kunai. Sokka, having prepared that Naruto was able to dodge the kwani, swung his sword down into the ground, stabbing through Naruto's leg. Naruto felt his back arch up as a loud scream forced its way from his mouth. His scream echoed through the clearing, making several birds flutter away. Sokka grinned as he crossed his arms over the hilt of his sword and placed his head in the center. His voice laced with disappointment as he shook his head at Naruto. How disappointing. I wasn't expecting much, but this was just pathetic. Naruto gasped in pain as he felt his vision start to blur. Trying his best to stay awake as he saw Sokka slowly push his blade in deeper. Naruto whimpered as he smacked his head onto the floor. His body felt numb as he experienced the excruciating pain. Blood leaking from his leg as Naruto peeked his eyes open to see Sokka, his malicious grin piercing through Naruto. I can't die here, Naruto thought to himself as he felt his eyelids start to flutter closed. His mind slowly losing consciousness, letting pitch darkness overtake his vision and consume his body. What would your family think? Naruto felt it again, a spark in his stomach as a mysterious voice boomed in his head. Naruto felt his body start to move on his own, gripping the sword by the blade. Sokka raised an eyebrow at the blonde, curiosity shining in his eyes as he watched Naruto grab on tightly. Naruto on the other hand felt the pain subside, the mysterious voice echoing the words again. Bouncing off the walls in his head, he reached his free hand up, digging his nails into Sokka's arm. Gritting his teeth he answered the voice, his voice dripping with annoyance. They would feel sorry for me, that I was too weak to do anything. And they would blame it on themselves. He yelled internally, blood leaking down his hand as he grabbed onto the blade tighter. And what was your promise? To prove them wrong. What the? Sokka never got to finish what he was saying before Naruto ripped the blade out from his leg in one smooth motion. Sokka, surprised by the action, didn't have time to move out of the way as the hilt of the sword smashed upwards into his jaw, sending his tumbling backwards. Sokka growled as he held his busted chin glaring at Naruto. Caught off guard by the blonde's sudden attitude change, his eyes widening as he saw the hole on his leg had already fully healed, not a cut in sight. Naruto grabbed the sword by the hilt, throwing it over to Sokka, forcing the black-haired male to dodge. Sokka leapt into the air, swinging his left foot down in a flying kick that sent a column of blue fire sailing across the forest floor, disintegrating everything in its path. Naruto didn't hesitate in his attack as he leaped up after Sokka, hands flying through seals as fast as he could. Water style, water dragon jutsu. He yelled, extending his arm out as the water from his previous jutsu came to life, forming a medium-sized dragon and sent itself soaring after Sokka from his right. The black-haired man cursed before stopping his technique, using his momentum to narrowly dodge the dragon. Water style, water torrent wave. Sokka widened his eyes as the dragon exploded next to him, the sudden force taking the air out of him as he was sent flying down onto the floor, making a decent-sized crater. Naruto landed on his feet trying to catch his breath, wondering if that was enough to stop the man. Before Naruto could relish in any sort of victory, the body of Sokka suddenly puffed into smoke, replaced with a log of wood. Kawarimi, you little shit. Naruto turned around just in time to see a flame-covered foot come his way. Reacting quickly, he brought his forearm up to block the attack. He growled as the flames burnt his arm as the force from the attack sent his body crashing to the floor. His head smacked against the floor, bouncing in pain, but Sokka didn't stop there, sending an axe kick to the boy's stomach. Naruto gasped as he felt his body submerge itself deeper into the soil beneath him. "You bastard! I'm going to kill you!" Sokka yelled, grabbing Naruto by the neck, lifting him up so he could stare at the boy in his eyes. His hand gripping Naruto's windpipe, making the blonde gasp for air. "You really are a son of a bitch, aren't you? I'll admit you caught me by surprise, but it won't happen again." He yelled again, this time slamming Naruto into the nearest tree, almost snapping the log in two. Naruto winced as he forced his eyes back to Sokka's own yellow eyes. Finding the effort to grin, Naruto reached up, trying to dig his nails into Sokka's cheek. Sokka, seeing the blonde in his grasp start to smile, felt a huge sense of anger wash over him. Scowling, his grip tightened on the blonde's neck, pushing him deeper into the tree, making the bark give out an unpleasant cracking sound. "And what's so funny, brat? You got any last words before I kill you here?" Naruto chuckled as he gave a curt nod, his smile only widening. Generating his chakra to his body. "Shunshin," he croaked out before vanishing from sight, appearing directly behind the shocked body of Sokka. The older man widened his eyes as he turned his head, seeing the blonde boy. Naruto's eyes wide, showing his 3 Tomo Sharingan spinning widely in his left eye. Catching Sokka in his line of sight, making his body freeze up. The Sharingan. His body felt like it was paralyzed, his muscles refused to work, and all the feeling in his legs were gone. His feet seemingly cemented into the ground as he watched the blonde boy get closer to him. He couldn't even feel the chakra circulating in his body anymore. Naruto's hand came up, grasping the back of Sokka's shirt, his free hand making an arching motion as the blood from his hand started to float besides his blood style, red spiral. Taking advantage of Sokka's loss of displacement from his genjutsu, the blood from his hand flowed upwards, taking the form of a 3-pronged spiral blade. Pulling Sokka back, and with a yell he plunged the blood spiral through Sokka's chest, bursting through his stomach and taking his heart out of his body. The crunching sound from Sokka's insides played in Naruto's head as a silent scream tried to find its way out of the man's mouth. "Why, you bastard!" Naruto felt the man's body fall limp, only being held up by Naruto's jutsu. Naruto broke the jutsu, letting the blood spiral loose, its form splashing back into its original state. With a soft thud, Sokka's body fell to the ground lifeless. Naruto felt his eyes go wide in horror as his Sharingan eye traced over the body of a man that he killed. Looking down to his hand, seeing it rock back and forth as he suddenly found it hard to breathe. He didn't know what it would have felt like to take a life, but this wasn't what he was expecting. He felt awful, like he could empty his insides at any moment. Gripping his hand that ended it all and forced his eyes shut, ignoring the growing wetness. Dread feeding his very core, feeling his shoulders slump down, the face of pure fear of Sokka looking at him etched into his mind forever. "You did the right thing." Naruto didn't react to the voice this time, letting his words linger in the back of his mind. This man was a member of the Blue Flames, killing is what they did. They thrived off taking the lives of others and taking whatever they would want. So by taking his life, it should stop needless killing, right? Naruto felt his heartbeat speed up as his breathing became more erratic, feeling his head lean backwards, his feet kicking up a cloud of dirt as he hit the floor. His body suddenly weak from the excessive chakra use, completely unaware of the increasing footsteps making their way closer to him. Naruto ni. Sai to the right. Ninja art. Rabid dogs. Sai said, standing in place as 3 dogs made of pure ink materialized out of his scroll, growling as they jumped, tearing and ripping apart the flesh of the attacking shinobi. Shizuka appeared at his side, arm on his shoulder as she smirked at the dying ninja. All screaming for their life as they got ripped apart. Sai looked over to Shizuka, his face emotionless as he raised his brush back to his scroll. "Tits-chan, please cover the rear." Shizuka growled at Sai, glaring at the boy as she threw a kunai behind them. Forming a single-handed seal, the kunai split apart, taking the shape of about 50 metallic senbon needles. "What have I said about calling me that?" she yelled, ignoring the screams of the people that got caught up in her needle barrage. Sai just smiled at her before lifting his scroll up, pushing in where his drawing was at. "It's the placeholder until I find a new name for you, Tits-chan," he said, forming a single seal as a large ink bear jumped from his scroll, roaring loudly as it swiped its large claws across several enemy shinobis' necks. Blood squirted out, coloring the monochromatic bear red as he took off to the opposite side of the room. Anko watched in amusement as she leaned on the wall, letting her students handle the rest of the enemies. After Sai and Shizuka effectively managed to kill the guards out front, they quickly snuck their way into the cabin. Anko took the lead, summoning snakes from her sleeves that took out the majority of the people inside. They didn't put up much of a fight. So she let her 2 students deal with the cleanup. There was a surprising amount of people inside, 30 to 40 shinobi crowded around a large table, not even aware of their entrance. Anko averted her eyes from her students as she calmly walked over to the table that she assumed the more important people seated. Stepping over a few bodies, she leaned over, scanning the table for any interesting contents. Raising an eyebrow, she bent down to pick up a bloodied folder that found its way onto the floor, hearing footsteps get closer to her. Find anything interesting, Snake Sensei? Snake Sensei. Really, Sai, you couldn't think of anything else? Shizuka blanched, looking at Sai like he had grown a second head. He looked at her in confusion. I thought it was fitting. Anko ignored their bickering as she opened the folder. Some of the papers inside were hard to read since they were stained with blood. Frowning, she took a seat on one of the chairs, placing the folder down, letting the papers fall out. Sai and Shizuka peered over their sensei's shoulders. It seems the genus wood they had stolen has already been sold to a group of missing nin. This was a complete bust, Shizuka said, but Anko quickly shook her head at the girl. While the wood might have been sold, this should send a message to the Blue Flames to not target Tsuna again. Anko said, narrowing her eyes as she traced over the documents again. She had a weird feeling in the pit of her stomach. Something seemed off, something she was missing. She turned over to Sai, motioning the folder closest to her. Can you please look this folder over, Sai? You have a much better eye for these types of things. Sai only nodded, taking the folder and taking a seat at the table, moving the dead body that was in his way. Anko looked back to Shizuka, a hand on her chin. Shizuka, I want you to search all of these bodies to see if they have any useful information on them. Shizuka nodded before leaving her sensei. Anko stood in place as she narrowed her eyes at the cabin, the feeling in her stomach growing uneasy by the second. This room is quiet, quieter than any room I've ever been in, she thought to herself, taking a step closer to the wall, letting her hand trace the woodwork. Naruto and Narumi should have been capable enough to take out those guards outside, then what is taking so long? If anything were to happen, surely we would have heard it happening outside. She mused as nails then moved over the wooden wall, tracing invisible lines, letting it dig into the log. It made no sound at all. You seem lost in thought, Snake Sensei. Anko turned to see Sai staring at her, his expression stoic, never changing as he held the folder under his arm. Anko nodded her head at Sai, raising an eyebrow in thought. Something is off about this cabin, she said, and Sai nodded in agreement, admit a bit hesitant. Yes, I couldn't shake the feeling myself either. And Blondie-kun and Narumi-san are nowhere to be seen. He finished, narrowing his eyes in thought. I'm going to go out and look for them. Sai, stay with Shizuka, I'll be back. Before she had time to make her leave, the door to the cabin flew open, as Narumi walked in carrying an unmoving Naruto slung over her shoulder. The rest of Team 11 went silent as they watched the Namikas walk through. Anko broke out of her trance, quickly making her way over to the smaller girl and forcefully taking Naruto from her grasp. Anko's eyes widening as she saw the state of her student, dread filling her for a moment, automatically thinking the worst of her favorite blonde. Sai and Shizuka got to their senses as they huddled around Naruto. Sai reached out, pushing his index finger into the blonde's lower jaw. He breathed out a sigh of relief. He's just unconscious. Anko and Shizuka let out a matching sigh of relief as well, both their hearts calming at Sai's words. Anko then looked up, sending a chilling glare over to Narumi. The older Namikas gulped at the look Anko sent her. Shizuka already getting to work on patching Naruto up. Care to tell me what happened to him, Narumi-san? She said between her teeth, her anger starting to get the better of her. Rethinking her decision if it was smart to let the two siblings pair up together. She had to bite her cheek in hopes to quell the strong urge to stab Narumi right between the eyes. Narumi only nodded as she began to retell the events that led her to finding Naruto in the woods. From getting separated, to her killing the shinobi that attacked her, and finally finding her brother in the middle of the woods lying next to a dead body. And that's when I found him. He was already unconscious when I got there. But the man he was facing, he was already dead. Narumi finished, happy to see Anko's death glare finally subside. Shizuka nodded as he finished looking over Naruto, shocked to see that he sustained practically no injuries. That would make sense. He doesn't look to be hurt at all. Just suffering from chakra exhaustion, she said, grabbing a hold of his pant leg and raising an eyebrow. But the strange thing is that he should have injuries. What do you mean, Tits-chan? Shizuka grumbled at the name but explained anyway, grabbing Naruto's left leg, showing him the decent-sized hole that resided just under his thigh. His pants seemed to have been punctured somehow, but not sliced, she said, placing her hand in the hole and using her fingers to open it wider. You can clearly see that it was stabbed through, it's stained with blood. But there isn't even a hole in his skin, she said. The rest of the team looked at each other in confusion. That certainly was odd. Narumi felt her body tense and her eyes narrow. The voice in her head made its appearance once again. How strange indeed. Narumi pushed the voice away into the deepest parts of her mind, not wanting to be bothered by it at this moment. She cleared her throat, gathering the attention of the rest of the team. Well, the good thing is that Naruto-ni is perfectly safe, she said happily, proud to know that her brother managed to protect himself. Granted, the enemy he was facing was probably no stronger than Ina-chan in strength, she mused to herself before getting to her feet. Narumi-san, you say Naruto only fought one person, right? Did you have the body with you? Narumi nodded as she pulled out a sealing scroll and tossed it to Anko. The purple-haired Junin caught it with ease before walking to the table again and opening the scroll. After the smoke cleared from the scroll, Anko felt her face fall in shock. What the fuck? Sai raised an eyebrow at his sensei, getting up to see what had shocked her. Only to relish in surprise. That's Sokka Shin, Sai said, pointing at the mutilated body in front of him. Narumi frowned, she had never heard that name before in her life. But the two of them seemed to be making a big deal out of it. Why would they be so shocked to see that they ran into a weak missing nin? It was fairly common to run into at least one other shinobi while traveling from town to town, especially country to country. Shizuka next to her had no problem voicing her confusion. Who's Sokka Shin? Anko closed her eyes and brought her hand up and started to rub her forehead. Not sure what to make of the man's dead body. Sokka Shin, an upper B-class Junin level missing nin from Awagakur. And the founder of the Blue Flames. Anko said, making both females go wide-eyed. Both for completely different reasons. Shizuka managed a small smile as a chuckle escaped her throat. Wow, I had no idea Naruto was that strong. I'll make sure not to underestimate him next time, she said, glad to know that her teammate wasn't weak. I mean, he did manage to take down a Junin-level shinobi after all. That's interesting. Anko raises an eyebrow, hearing the black-haired boy next to her whisper to himself. Looking over at him, she saw his eyes were closed, his eyebrows scrunched in concentration. They watched in tense silence as they awaited the boy to speak. Moving slowly, Sai reached under his arm, grabbing the file Anko had given him earlier. Flipping it open, he picked out a page. When you told me to look through this folder, I found quite an interesting amount of things, he said, motioning the others to follow as he placed them on the table, 4 pages scattered out. Taking in a deep breath, he spoke. All 4 of these pages are just updates in sales that the group has made in the past few months, nothing out of the ordinary. But, he pointed at the edge of the pages, running his finger along the border until it reached the bottom of the page. Tapping his finger a few times, all 4 of these have matching sealing arrays on them. I'm not very good at sealing, so I can't tell what they do exactly. He finished, looking over to the female Namikas, noticing her stoic expression. Narumi-san, if I recall, sealing runs in your family. Do you recognize this type of seal? Narumi stepped up, picking up the pages and examining them closer. I'm not really into seals, Tu-san is the only one really interested in them, she said, gaining a frown from Sai. But before he could say anything to Narumi, she continued speaking. But from what I could tell, this sealing array has a special rule that must be followed. What kind of rule? Narumi looked up to Anko. I'm not so sure myself, it could be anything really. Only blonde-haired people could open it, or black-haired. It could even matter on what your blood type is, or what chakra affinity you have. The possibilities are endless. Sai nodded, crossing his arms over his chest. I see, that is quite a problem. It must be important if they went through all that trouble to hide it under such a seal. Then that would explain this cabin too. Anko said, drawing the attention of the three kids. Anko elaborated, I noticed something weird when we entered this cabin. They had no idea we were even coming. It's like they didn't hear a single thing that was happening until we finally came through the door. What do you mean, Anko-sensei? That there must be a seal somewhere in this cabin that blocks out all sound coming in or out. Some sort of soundproof seal. She mused, finally making sense of the bizarre situation. Crossing her arms under her breast, she gave a deep sigh. But why would they put a soundproof seal on the cabin? What possible good would they have done for them? Fascinating, Sai said, grabbing the last piece of paper hidden away in the folder, showing it to the group. This was the only page that didn't have a sealing array. I tried to see if there was a genjutsu or secret chakra message hidden somewhere, but I found nothing of the sort. Then what's got you so fascinated by it? This. Sai turned to Narumi and Anko, reading aloud from the page. A battle of blue and red commences. Scorching earth with a magnificent blue hue. Where a soundless room will stand, awaiting visitors and secret information. Once the hue has been smothered, a boy is his killer, allowing for an outstanding debut. To meet on the next full moon, in a land made of frozen colorless white. Sai said, taking a moment to let his words sink in, giving him enough time to digest what they heard. Anko was the first to recover, blinking in confusion and crossing her arms under her breasts. The weird sinking feeling in her stomach returning as she closed her eyes in thought. What does that mean? It almost sounds like a fortune. Sai nodded his head at Shizuka in agreement, rubbing his chin. I agree, I had thought the same thing myself, he said, taking a short pause to gather his thoughts. His thoughts made him frown, getting quite caught up in this note. It talks about a soundless room, which would have to be this cabin. Along with secret info, and my only guess would be the sealing arrays on the rest of the note, he finished. Narumi peered over to the unmoving object of their inner thoughts. The first line, a battle of blue and red commences. Could it really be referencing Naruto ni? She mused aloud. Well, his eyes are blue, and he uses water jutsu. So the red would have to be this soccer guy, right? He is a fire user after all. Anko shook her head at Shizuka. Sokka-shin was known for his use of blue fire, it's what made him famous. And gave him the idea for the blue flames. Shizuka frowned at her explanation, not making sense of what the red in the fortune could be. Skipping in her thoughts, she heard Sai speak from her left. While that may be a mystery only Blondie-kun knows. We will have to ask him when he wakes up, he said, making the three of them nod. And when the blue hue is smothered, is that referring to Sokka's deaths? And a debut? Who could possibly be debuting? Whatever it is, this doesn't seem like a coincidence. It feels like real fortune telling. Anko pursed her lips in concentration. The more her and her team kept thinking about the current circumstances, the more bizarre it seemed to get. In all her life as a ninja, she had never come across anything like this before, not even when she was training under the snake Sanin Orochimaru. The whole thing was beginning to sound like a mystery. More and more questions kept getting asked, and they didn't have an answer to a single one of them. Glancing over at Naruto's still body, watching as his chest raised ever so slightly with his breaths. Narrowing her eyes in recognition, whatever was happening, she knew it was because Naruto had taken the life of Sokka-shin. Could whoever gave this fortune really see the future? That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.